Hey, you crazy history buffs and midnight scrollers. Welcome back to another bonkers tale from the past, brought to you by your slightly deranged storyteller. If you're vibing with these wild history rides, hit that like or subscribe. It's cheaper than a shot of Frontier whiskey and keeps my storytelling saloon open. I'm itching to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Drop a comment so we can geek out over how we're all linked by a love for history's worst Airbnb experiences, no matter the time zone. Now, snag a drink, not coffee, you'll see why. Dim those lights, and let's dive into why you, yes you, with your Wi-Fi and flush toilets, wouldn't survive a single day in the real Wild West. Zap, you've just time-warped to 1875, smacking the American frontier. Yippee! You're living the cowboy fantasy. Except, your odds of surviving are worse than betting your life savings on a three-legged mule. Before you can mutter howdy, your nose is screaming for a divorce. Forget your fancy espresso. This place smells like a porta potty, and a skunk had a love child. Meet Martha, your new roomie, who thinks baths are a once-a-month treat, if the creek's feeling generous. Winter? She's rocking the same sweat-stained dress till spring, smelling like a walking compost heap. You're crammed in a one-room shack with 6 other folks who haven't met soap since the invention of the wheel. Deodorant? Not even a twinkle in an inventor's eye. The air's so thick with body odor, you could slice it with a butter knife. But hold your nose, because outside's worse. Step into the fresh air. Spoiler, it's not. And you're slapped with the Wild West's signature cologne. Horse poop, cow dung, and pig slop piled high like a manure monument. Towns? They're basically open-air landfills with knee-deep natural decor fermenting under the sun. Toss in raw sewage from outhouses that are just glorified holes, rotting food scraps, and the occasional dead critter nobody's bothered to yeet. It's a smell that doesn't just linger. It moves in and calls you partner. Your bed? Oh, honey, forget those cute pioneer quilts from the movies. You're sprawled on a burlap sack stuffed with straw. Or, if you're living large, corn husks. That's lumpier than a bad Tinder date. Bonus, it's a bug rave. Bed bugs, fleas, and lice are treating your skin like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Waking up feels like you've been wrestling a cactus. Take Jake, the miner next door, who spent yesterday hauling rocks in a cave hotter than a dragon's armpit. His hands are scarred, his back's hunched like a question mark, and his cough says, "See you at 35, maybe." Frontier life doesn't do weekends or PTO. You work till you're dust, and worked to death is a legit checkbox on death certificates. It's winter? Congrats, your shack's colder than a polar bear's toenails. Your breath's fogging up indoors because the fire's out. Wood's rarer than a polite saloon brawl. Families burn buffalo poop. Yep, poop. To stay toasty. Summer? Your cabin's a sauna with no off switch, so you sleep outside, dodging snakes, wolves, and bandits who think neighborly means steal your boots. Weather's a serial prankster. 1 second it's sunny, the next a blizzard's trying to turn you into a human icicle. Tornadoes and flash floods don't RSVP, they crash the party, wrecking wagon trains like it's their job. No weather apps, just you squinting at the sky, hoping it's not in a mood. Your clothes are a crime scene. Guys get Yahoo outfits, pants that could double as sandpaper, and shirts that itch like a bad rash. Ladies, you're laced into corsets that squeeze your soul out, petticoats heavier than a stagecoach, and dresses that mop up every speck of frontier filth. Washing? That's a day-long ordeal, and water's pricier than gold. Your threads smell like they've been soaked in despair and left to marinate. Those shiny cowboy hats in westerns? Lies. Your hat's been through more dirt than a gravedigger's shovel, your stomach's growling like a rabid coyote. Breakfast time. Hope you love beans, hardtack that could chip a tooth, and coffee that tastes like burnt regret. It's the same menu for every meal, forever, because varieties for city slickers. Fresh veggies, a 3-month-a-year unicorn. Meat's either salted into jerky, or smoked till it's basically shoe leather. No fridge means you eat fresh kills ASAP. hence those community BBQs that are less party and more eat this before it poisons us. Scurvy's the Frontier's VIP, giving you bleeding gums, falling teeth, and a one-way ticket to the graveyard, all because nobody's heard of an orange. The coffee's a special kind of evil, boiled till it's thicker than tar, spiked with eggshells, or, brace yourself, tobacco juice. Yep, spit in your brew was an upgrade. Before you stumble outside, check your boots, unless you want a scorpion or rattlesnake as a roomie. Shaking out your shoes isn't quirky, it's survival 1-to-1. Plenty of folks sport scars from critters who thought their boots were a cozy Airbnb. Outside, the prairie's so empty it's like the world ghosted you. Your nearest neighbor's a day's trek away, and town's a gamble through terrain that's got death trap written all over it. This loneliness isn't poetic, it's soul-crushing. Prairie madness was real, driven by isolation, stress, and a life that makes modern Mondays look like a spa day. Horses? Another Hollywood scam. A decent pony cost more than your annual salary, and they dropped dead faster than saloon drunks in a gunfight. Most folks walked everywhere, turning their feet into their MVP. As you stand there, drowning in smells, aches, and the realization that Westerns lied harder than a snake oil salesman, here's the kicker. You've been awake for 1 hour. You've got 23 more to survive in a world with no mercy, no do-overs, and no Yelp to complain about the service. The sun rises over the prairie, gorgeous and heartless, kicking off a day where survival's a grind. Luck's your only friend, and hope's just a fancy word for, maybe I won't die today. Welcome to the Wild West, partner. Good luck, you're gonna need it. You've made it a whole hour in 1875. Congrats, you're already outliving a solid chunk of frontier newbies who probably tripped over a rattlesnake and called it quits. Now, you're itching to visit the nearest town, Deadwood Springs, population 347 when everyone's behaving, or 298 after a weekend brawl that makes Black Friday look cuddly. Strap on your least filthy boots, because this trip's going to be a wild, smelly, laugh or cry adventure. First up, you've got a choice straight out of a horror movie. Walk 5 miles through a landscape that's basically Mother Nature's hit list, or hitch a ride with a wagon driver who's either 3 sheets to the wind, unhinged, or both. Walking means dodging wolves, flash floods, and the very real chance of getting lost and becoming vulture chow. Hitching? You're betting your life on a guy who thinks road safety is chugging moonshine while racing a rickety wagon down a cliff. You pick walking because at least you'll only have yourself to blame when a coyote's using your femur as a chew toy. The trail to Deadwood Springs isn't a road, it's a vague rumor scratched into the dirt by folks who might have died halfway. Dry days. You're choking on dust clouds so thick you'll be spitting prairie till Christmas. Rainy days. The mud's deep enough to swallow a horse, and you're slogging through it like a very sad goldfish. When you finally spot town, you realize urban planning here means plot buildings wherever you drop your hammer. The main street zigzags like it was drawn by a drunk toddler, with shacks so crooked they look like they're auditioning for a funhouse. The streets themselves are a biohazard. Paving? That's decades away. You're wading through a stew of dirt, horse poop, human waste, rotting scraps, and the occasional rat corpse, all seasoned with tobacco spit. When it rains, this mess becomes prairie soup, a knee-deep slop that's half quicksand, half sewer, and all nightmare. You'll wish you'd brought scuba gear. The smell hits like a slap from a grumpy buffalo. If you thought your cabin was a stink fest, Deadwood Springs is a full-on odor apocalypse. It's the collective funk of 347 unwashed souls, their livestock, their garbage, and their who needs a toilet attitude. You're nostalgic for the days when you only had to sniff 6 sweaty roommates. Flies? They're not just buzzing, they're staging a full-on air invasion, swarming like tiny, winged paparazzi who've decided you're their next meal. These superflies, raised on rotting everything, laugh at swatters and dive bomb your face like they've got a personal vendetta. You stagger to the Silver Dollar Saloon, partly for a drink to numb this nightmare, partly because it's the only building not actively collapsing. Run by Murphy O'Brien, an Irishman who swapped potato famine for this glorious shed, it's no Hollywood hotspot. Forget swinging doors or piano tunes. This place is a dirt-floored shack with dreams of grandeur. The bar is planks on whiskey barrels. The floor's a boozy mud pit, and the chairs look like Murphy glued driftwood together during a bender. The booze, it's not sipping whiskey. It's liquid regret, spiked with tobacco juice for flavor, pepper for zing, turpentine for wow, or, for the truly deranged, gunpowder to make you feel alive. One bad gulp could blind you, which explains why half the patrons squint like they're auditioning for a pirate movie. The crowd's a who's who of bad life choices. Meet Dynamite Dan Peterson, who lost 3 fingers to a mining oopsie, but still juggles explosives because, quote, "I've got 7 left, don't I?" Then there's Lucky Mike Sullivan, who's been shot, stabbed, and cow-trampled but keeps waking up, probably out of sheer spite. Saloon fights aren't the cool duels you see in westerns. They're sloppy, sudden, and sparked by nonsense. Someone cheats at cards, someone mutters, "Your hat's dumb," or someone's just had enough rot gut to think fistfighting is therapy. Brawls end with chair leg beatdowns, back alley shootings, or someone yeeted through Murphy's windows, aka holes in the wall. Everyone's armed to the teeth, not for drama, but because bears, bandits, and bad luck don't RSVP. Fun fact, Deadwood Springs has gun control. You hand over your pistols at the town line, or Sheriff William Iron Will Garrett will make you wish you had. Garrett, a grizzled ex-cavalry guy, traded war for this gig, which is like soldiering but with crappier pay and more creative ways to die. He keeps the peace over 1,000 square miles with 1 deputy, a badge that's more rust than metal, and a shotgun that's been around since the Declaration of Independence. You're in his town now, so behave, or don't, and see how fast prairie justice turns your day into a very bad one. Justice in Deadwood Springs is a real knee-slapper. Sheriff Garrett's got a no-nonsense system. Caught pickpocketing? You're guilty, partner. A crowd saw you swipe that pie? You're double guilty, and the only appeal is to the buzzards. Lawyers? Rarer than a unicorn in a saloon. The nearest judge is 300 miles away, probably lost in a sandstorm. Verdicts come fast, final, and sometimes even nail the right crook, like hitting a barn door with a shotgun. Next door to the saloon, Mary Chang's general store is the Wild West's answer to a chaotic flea market. Mary, a Chinese immigrant, hit California during the gold rush, realized selling shovels to starry-eyed miners beat digging for gold, and somehow landed in Deadwood Springs after a wild mix-up with a map and too much optimism. Her shop's a miracle of organized chaos, packed with everything from bullets to booties, all stuffed into a space tighter than a corset. Prices? A can of peaches, if it didn't rot on the wagon, costs $20 in today's bucks. A bag of flour? That's a ranch hand's weekly paycheck. Gone. These aren't rip-offs, it's just frontier logistics. Every item schlepped thousands of miles via snail-paced oxen, braving deserts, bandits, and rivers that swallow wagons whole. Half the goods arrive as spoiled mush or bandit loot. Mary's a legend, though, fluent in 4 languages, packing a pistol under the counter, and crunching exchange rates while sweet-talking suppliers in Mandarin and customers in cowboy slang. She's dodged riots, dodged taxes, and stared down local thugs trying to boot her out. Hollywood skipped her story, but Deadwood Springs would collapse without her hustle. The town's hospital is Dr. Samuel Porter, a one-man medical train wreck. His CV? 6 months of med school before he went broke, a gig with a St. Louis barber who doubled as a surgeon, and battlefield experience stitching up drunks in bar brawls. His office pulls quadruple duty as doctor, dentist, vet, and undertaker. Because why waste a good shack? His medical kit's straight out of a torture dungeon. A saw that could fell a tree, forceps that yank bullets or teeth with equal chaos, and laudanum, liquid opium. That's either your anesthesia, painkiller, or a final toast, depending on how much Porter likes your odds. Surgery's a roll of the dice, done without sterilization because germs are still just a wild theory. Porter sanitizes by wiping tools on his grubby apron. And anesthesia? That's you biting a bullet while he carves. Half his patients kick the bucket, but he's thrilled with that 50% win rate. Frontier medicine's version of a gold star. Dentistry's even crazier. Toothache? Rip it out. His tools? Pliers from the blacksmith, a carpenter's chisel, and whiskey to numb the terror. Nobody brushes, so by 30, folks' breath could knock a buffalo flat. Education's in the hands of Miss Sarah Williams, a 22-year-old Connecticut gal who signed up for an adventurous teaching job and got a one-room schoolhouse that's also the church, town hall, and occasional hoedown spot. She's herding 40 kids, ages 5 to 17, who speak 6 languages, think books are fancy firewood, and ditch class to plow fields. Sarah's stuck reteaching ABCs to kids who vanish for harvest season. Discipline? A hickory stick and the firm belief that a good SWAT helps kids memorize spelling instead of worrying about starving. Whacking wasn't mean. It was prep for a world where you're a grown-up at 12 and dead by 30. Banking's run by Augustus Moneybags Whitman, a slick operator who went from rigging poker in San Francisco to running a Nevada brothel before deciding frontier banking was his ticket to respectability. Same hustle, better title. His bank is a beefed-up shed behind Mary's store with a safe better suited for grandma's pearls than gold. No FDIC, no rules, just Whitman taking gold dust, coins, dodgy banknotes, or even a goat if you're broke. His exchange rates swing wild, based on market vibes, his rent due date, or how much whiskey he chugged last night. Bank busts are the Wild West's favorite drama. When they tank, your savings vanish faster than a card sharp in a saloon. Whitman's bank's still kicking, thanks to tight-fisted loans and his downright gleeful habit of snatching farms when folks miss a payment. As night creeps in and you hunt for a place to crash, Deadwood Springs hits you as a glorious, terrifying mess. It's a global magnet for dreamers, Chinese shopkeepers, Irish barkeeps, ex-soldiers, and naive teachers, chasing big breaks, but every shot at glory comes with a "you might die tonight" fine print. This town's a barely tamed circus, held together by bartered deals, neighborly trust, and the grim math that teamwork equals survival, while brawling equals a coffin. It's the wildest, riskiest democracy you've ever seen, where rules are scribbled in the dirt, and every day's a life-or-death improv act. Tomorrow you'll face frontier travel, and why most folks who left Deadwood Springs didn't live to write a Yelp review. After a night in Deadwood Springs luxury hotel, aka a lumpy cot shared with 2 sweaty strangers and a bedbug flash mob, you've decided to yeet yourself westward with a wagon train. Congrats, you're now one of 400,000 dreamers who tried this between 1840 and 1880, 40,000 of whom ended up as prairie fertilizer. But, 90% survival odds are solid, right? Nervous laughter. Your travel buddies are a wild mix of starry-eyed ambition and "what am I doing here" panic. Meet the Andersons, Lars, Ingrid, and their 4 kids, Swedish immigrants chasing America's Freeland deal, blissfully unaware it comes with a side of death. Lars, a carpenter, thinks wilderness is sleeping in his shed when Ingrid's mad about his schnapps habit. He's never seen a coyote or a prairie, and his survival skills are limited to hammering nails and dodging his wife's glare. Then there's Captain Rodriguez, a former Mexican army officer turned wagon train guide, leading gringos across land his grandpa lost in the Mexican-American Wars. Whoops, we took your stuff phase. He speaks 3 languages, knows every puddle from Missouri to California, and has the haunted stare of a guy who's dug too many graves. 7 successful crossings? The man's a statistical unicorn, basically winning the frontier lottery every trip. Rounding out the crew are the Thompsons, Henry, a bankrupt Ohio shopkeeper, Clara, his very pregnant wife, who didn't sign up to pop out kid number 3 in a bouncing wagon, and their 2 kids, 6 and 8, who'll either grow up tougher than nails or end up as tiny tombstones. It's a 50-50 shot, and the prairie's not taking bets. Your wagon train's a motley crew, 12 families, 43 adults, 27 kids, and enough cows, pigs, and chickens to start a petting zoo. You're all set to conquer 2,000 miles of terrain that's got a personal vendetta against humans. The wagons? They're not the cozy prairie schooners from westerns. They're rickety torture boxes on wheels, built by folks who thought oxen and a quick prayer could defeat mountains. Each wagon's a claustrophobic 4x10-foot nightmare, stuffed with a family's entire life, plus the family itself. Privacy? Nope. Comfort? A myth. The constant rattling makes you feel like you're inside a maraca, and motion sickness is your new best friend. Day 1 slaps you with prairie soup, mud so thick it turns wagon wheels into sad, stuck pancakes. Your oxen are strong, but dumber than a sack of hammers, panicking in puddles, and turning a minor bog into a full-blown engineering crisis. Freeing a mired wagon takes every able-bodied soul, hours of swearing that'd make a pirate blush, and enough muscle to make you wish you'd joined a gym before time traveling. Captain Rodriguez lays out the daily grind with the enthusiasm of a funeral director, which, let's be real, he kinda is. You're up before dawn to dodge the heat, and everyone walks, unless you're a toddler, dying, or Clara-level pregnant. The wagons are already groaning under the weight of your worldly goods, and adding humans risks the oxen keeling over, leaving you stranded with a 2,000-pound paperweight. You're trudging 15 to 20 miles a day in scratchy frontier clothes, hauling supplies, and your modern sneakers are crying for mercy. Blisters sprout blisters. Your legs are staging a mutiny, and your back's screaming like it's auditioning for a horror flick. This is day 1 of a 4 to 6 month slog, assuming no blizzards, bandits, or bacteria decide to spice things up. Speaking of bacteria, meet your wagon train's real MVP. Most vicious plague, cholera. Not wolves, not raids, but tiny germs that turn your guts into a fire hose of doom. Cholera loves dirty water, and your streams are basically communal toilets for every wagon train before you, used for drinking, cooking, and, yep, pooping. The disease dries you out faster than a bad Tinder date, leaving victims as shriveled husks while they're still breathing. Breakfast champs turn into graveside guests by supper, and the train can't stop to cry about it. Lingering means getting snowed in at a mountain pass, where survival becomes a cute fantasy. Rodriguez has buried whole families, slapped crosses on their dirt mounds, and kept rolling because the alternative's a frozen game over. Your doctor is Clara Johansson, a Danish immigrant who learned nursing from a half-read medical book and sheer grit. Her cholera playbook? Prayers, laudanum to dull the agony, and keeping folks warm and hydrated. Sounds sweet, till you realize warm means huddling by fires fueled by dried buffalo poop, and hydrated means sipping the same sketchy water that's killing everyone. Clara's med kit is a horror show, a bone saw for lopping off limbs, forceps for yanking bullets, dodgy herbs that might just be weeds, and enough laudanum to knock out a herd of cattle. She set bones without painkillers, patched gunshot wounds, and delivered babies in conditions that'd make a vet faint. You're in her hands now, so maybe start praying yourself. River crossings are like playing Russian roulette with a wagon and some very confused oxen. These rickety boxes weren't built to float, but crossing the Platte River means turning them into janky boats by slathering tar and canvas on the gaps and praying you don't become the world's worst submarine. You unload everything, waterproof the wagon, reload it like a high-stakes Jenga game, and hope the oxen don't freak out mid-river and turn your trip into a soggy rodeo with a side of drowning. The Platte was a serial killer, claiming hundreds of lives. Wagons flipped, families sank, livestock got yeeted by currents, and wheels buckled, leaving folks stranded where walk to town meant meet your maker. Your guide, Mountain Pete Wilson, is a grizzled miracle who's cheated death longer than a cat with 9 lives. A former fur trapper, he speaks multiple Indian languages, knows which plants won't kill you or make you see dancing cacti, and navigates by squinting at rocks like a human GPS. Without Pete, you're toast. Getting lost out here isn't just a bummer, it's a buffet for wolves, starvation, or frostbite. He tracks game over stone, finds water in dirt that looks deader than your dreams, and sweet-talks Indian tribes who see wagon trains as either swap meets or shooting galleries. Pete's diplomacy, gifts, respect, and enough guns to say, let's keep this chill. Hollywood lied about Indian attacks. they were rare. Most tribes preferred trading beads or blankets over starting beef, and some even bailed out stranded settlers for a fee. The real cultural gut punch came from government troops and policies, not random raids. Still, bad blood simmered in spots, and a wrong move could turn a pit stop into a very bad day. Bigger worries? Wildlife with attitude. Grizzly bears treated humans like snacks or piñatas. Mountain lions stalked like creepers in the night, and wolf packs eyed your cows, but wouldn't say no to a side of you. Rattlesnakes were the worst party crashers, slithering into camps at dusk when you're stumbling around without a flashlight. A bite might not kill you, but with no anti-venom and sketchy frontier medicine, you'd either die or limp along with a souvenir disability that made trail life even spicier. Weather was the ultimate troll. Prairie thunderstorms zapped folks and cows with lightning while sparking grass fires that raged for days. Tornadoes popped up like uninvited guests, shredding wagons and leaving you with nothing but regret. Hailstorms pelted you with ice chunks that could knock out a horse. Flash floods turned dry creeks into wagon-eating rapids, and droughts dried up water holes, forcing detours that added weeks to your misery. The mental grind was brutal. Families buried kids, parents, or spouses, then kept marching because pausing risked everyone. No time to cry, no therapists, just raw grief that'd break a modern shrink. Trail madness was real. Stress, exhaustion, and loss cooked up depression, panic, or full-on meltdowns. Some folks checked out via suicide, others ditched their families to wander the wilderness, and a few got punchy over dumb stuff like, "You looked at my beans funny." The Andersons are cracking under the strain. They lost 2-year-old Eric to dysentery week 3, and Ingrid's hauling his toy horse, chatting to it like he's still there. Lars is hitting the medicinal booze hard, picking fights and risking a wagon train eviction. Their kids, Astrid, 8, and Niels, 10, are growing up fast. Astrid's cooking, babysitting, and playing nurse, while Niels handles guns, herds cows, and makes calls that'd stress a CEO. Food? Think prison rations, but worse. Hardtack biscuits are rock-hard Weevil hotels, adding crunchy protein to your sad diet. Salt pork's so briny it could mummify you, and dried beans need water and fuel you can't spare. Fresh meat's a treat when someone bags a deer, but gunshots draw predators or worse, so hunters share the haul fast before it turns to goo. You get a BBQ blowout, then it's back to Weevil biscuits and sodium overload that barely fuels your daily slog. Gear braking was a constant middle finger. Wagon wheels split, axles snapped, and harnesses gave out at the worst moments, like mid-river or on a cliff. Fixing stuff meant MacGyvering with whatever you had, and a major bust left you screwed. Spare parts and blacksmith tools weighed down wagons, but without them, you were dead. Some families ditched broken rigs and hiked on, lugging essentials with odds of surviving slimmer than a saloon dancer's paycheck. Halfway through, your wagon train's a shadow of its former self. Half the crew's dead, bailed, or sidelined by sickness or broken bones. The survivors shuffle on, driven by grim stubbornness and a whisper of desperation. Stopping's death, but pushing forward's only slightly less awful. Tomorrow, you'll dive into frontier economics, and why reaching California or Oregon just meant trading one set of headaches for a shiny new batch. You've made it halfway through your wagon train death march, which is like getting a gold star for not becoming Coyote Chow. You're chilling at Fort Laramie, the Wild West's version of a sketchy truck stop, field hospital, and dive bar all mashed together. But here's a plot twist: Hollywood buried under a pile of cowboy hats. The American West was a global party, not a whites-only rodeo. This place is a diversity jackpot, making those old Western flicks look like someone forgot to invite half the planet. Meet Bass Reeves, a black deputy U.S. Marshal who's 6'2" of pure badassery. He's nabbed over 3,000 crooks, murderers, horse thieves, even his own kid, because justice doesn't do family discounts. Born enslaved in Arkansas, he bolted during the Civil War, picked up Native American languages like it's no big deal, and became a law enforcement legend. Surviving this gig is like winning the lottery while dodging a lightning bolt and Bass is out here cashing checks and taking names. Oh, and surprise, about a quarter of cowboys were black. Hollywood's all yee-haw, white guys only, but ranching was a brutal, low-pay gig with zero clout, perfect for formerly enslaved folks chasing better lives post-Civil War. White dudes often pieced out for cushier jobs that didn't involve bunking with cows. Black cowboys like Deadwood Dick, Clark, and Nat Love were straight-up rock stars, roping cattle, shooting straight, and living off beans and coffee for months. Just as tough as any Stetson-wearing cliché. Then there's Carlos Mendoza, a vaquero whose family was ranching in Texas back when it was Mexico, with land grants bigger than some states. The Mexican-American War of 1846-48 flipped his family from Mexican bigwigs to American citizens faster than you can say border dispute. On paper, their land was safe. In reality, Anglo settlers snatched it through shady laws, jacked up taxes, and straight-up theft backed by crooked judges. Now Carlos works as a hired hand on his own family's turf, outriding and outroping greenhorn cowboys while speaking Spanish, English, and enough Comanche to haggle with tribal leaders who think everyone's a newbie on their land. The Chinese story in the West is a wild, unsung saga. Ah Sing rolled into California during the gold rush, dreaming of gold bars and a hero's return to China. Instead, he got hit with racist taxes, beatdowns from white miners, and locked out of the good claims. Plan B? He joined the Central Pacific Railroad, building the transcontinental line through hellscapes that killed around 1,200 Chinese workers. Picture dangling off cliffs in baskets to plant dynamite, working through Sierra blizzards, or handling nitroglycerin so touchy it could blow if you sneezed. Chinese crews got the deadliest jobs, lower pay than white workers, and lived in segregated camps where language barriers and racist co-workers made every day a middle finger. After the railroad wrapped, Ah Sing opened a laundry in Deadwood Springs because clean shirts were a surer bet than gold. His business keeps the town fresh-ish, despite occasional anti-Chinese tantrums from jealous white shopkeepers. Then there's the Native American side, which Hollywood turned into a cartoon villain fest. Chief Red Cloud of the Oglala Lakota tried playing nice, signing treaties to keep his people's hunting grounds in exchange for letting settlers pass. Spoiler, those treaties were about as sturdy as a paper towel in a monsoon. Red Cloud watched the buffalo, 30 to 60 million in 1800, down to under 1,000 by 1884, get obliterated in a blink. This wasn't just hunting, it was a cold-blooded plan to starve Plains tribes by wiping out their grocery store. General Philip Sheridan's vibe was no buffalo, no Indians. A combo of eco-sabotage and cultural erasure that'd make a war crimes lawyer's head spin. The U.S. Army handed out free bullets to hunters and threw parties for the buffalo's near extinction. The reservation system was another gut punch, forcing nomadic hunters onto barren, rocky patches chosen because nobody else wanted them. Treaties dumped tribes on land so bad it couldn't grow a weed, let alone support a culture. It was less, here's your new home, and more, good luck not starving. The West's diversity was real, but so was the brutal cost, and Fort Laramie's a front-row seat to both the dreams and the dirty deals. The Wild West was a cultural pressure cooker, and Native kids got the worst of it. They were yanked from their families and tossed into boarding schools like Carlisle Indian Industrial, where the motto was, kill the Indian, save the man. Basically, erase everything that makes you, you. Haircuts were mandatory, native languages were banned, and any whiff of tribal pride earned you a whack. These weren't schools, they were cultural jails, training kids for grunt work while preaching that their heritage was garbage. Disease, starvation, and abuse killed many. Survivors were caught in limbo, too whitewashed for their tribes, too Indian for white society. It's like being kicked out of two parties you didn't even want to attend. Europeans added more spice to the frontier stew. Take Heinrich Mueller, a German farmer who fled Bavaria's economic woes, only to find that prairie dirt laughs at your plow. He's battling tornadoes, wolves, and droughts with farming tricks that worked great in Europe, but flop in Deadwood Springs. Heinrich's English is shaky, so his wife Greta handles the haggling. while he mutters in German about why the sky keeps trying to kill him. The O'Sullivans, Irish escapees from the potato famine, swapped one nightmare for another. Patrick's breaking his back on railroads, mines, or whatever gig needs muscle and no job security. It beats starving in Ireland, but barely. Bridget's washing clothes and sewing to keep the family afloat, while their kids do jobs that'd make modern labor laws scream. Think tiny coal miners or pint-sized errand runners dodging saloon fights. Scandinavians like the Andersons brought cold-weather farming chops, but the prairie's like, hold my beer. No trees for building, no steady water, and weather that swings from inferno to ice age? Their Nordic know-how's about as useful as a snow shovel in a sandstorm. They're relearning everything, one dust-choked harvest at a time. Jewish immigrants like Samuel Goldstein rolled in with shopkeeper savvy, but zero clue about frontier chaos. Samuel's general store in Deadwood Springs is a cashless wonder, taking crops, mows, or a promise to fix his fence as payment. He's dodging anti-Semitism with a smile, building trust with everyone from Swedish farmers to Mexican ranchers, and proving that a good deal speaks louder than prejudice. Italians like the Rossinis showed up with winemaking swagger, only to learn that American dirt and grapes don't play by European rules. Giuseppe's vineyard dreams are wilting under prairie sun and Protestant side-eye, because Catholics weren't exactly the cool kids in Deadwood Springs. He's tweaking his vino game, but it's like teaching a cactus to tap dance. This multicultural mashup made frontier towns wilder than a saloon brawl. Economic rivalries sparked fistfights. Think Irish laborers versus Chinese launderers over who's stealing jobs. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was the U.S.'s first big nope to an entire race, cooked up after years of "those guys work too hard" whining in the West. Mexican landowners got screwed by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which promised to protect their land but let Anglo settlers swipe it through legal loopholes, sky-high taxes, and straight-up thuggery. Courts always back to the new guys, because who needs justice when you've got a sheriff on your payroll? Native Americans caught the ugliest end of the stick: military raids, forced marches to reservations, and policies hell-bent on wiping out their cultures. The only good Indian is a dead Indian wasn't just talk, it was the playbook for army campaigns and government schemes. Black folks heading west to dodge southern bigotry found new flavors of racism. Less whites-only signs, more "you're not really one of us" vibes. Some scored better jobs than in the South, but good luck getting a seat at the fancy saloon table. These tensions weren't just drama, they were life or death. Frontier towns needed everyone to pitch in, building barns, fighting off bandits, keeping the general store stocked, or the whole place collapsed. The wins were epic. Bass Reeves became a lawman legend, Chinese entrepreneurs thrived despite hate, some Mexican families held their ground, and tribes like the Cherokee pulled off survival acrobatics. But the losses? Brutal. Whole tribes vanished via war, smallpox, or cultural shredding. Chinese workers died by the thousands for railroads that made others rich. Mexican land grants evaporated, and European immigrants dropped like flies from cholera, shootouts, or plain bad luck. As you gear up to roll westward, the frontier's hitting you with its full paradox. It's the freest, most equal-ish place you've seen, where anyone could make it, but also a rigged game where the deck's stacked against half the players. It's a chaotic dance of teamwork and backstabbing where you're all in it together, until someone pulls a gun. Tomorrow you'll see how these towns tried to keep the peace when law was just a guy with a badge and a grudge, and justice was whatever kept the saloon open. Law and order in 1875, Deadwood Springs is less justice system and more let's not all kill each other before lunch. It's a glorious mess of official badges, vigilante posies, and the unspoken rule that ticking off your neighbor might earn you a one-way ticket to Bullet Town. Meet Marshall Elijah Barnes, the guy stuck herding this circus across 1,000 square miles. Think Rhode Island, but with more guns and worse attitudes. He's got one deputy, 2 horses, and a badge so shot up it looks like Swiss cheese. Barnes keeps the peace among folks who think dispute resolution means a quick draw and a long nap in the dirt. Barnes landed this gig because nobody else was dumb enough to take a job with the lifespan of a fruit fly and a paycheck that wouldn't buy a decent hat. A Civil War cavalry vet, he's dodged enough bullets and slept in enough ditches to handle grumpy drunks and trigger-happy cowpokes. His day kicks off pre-dawn, checking the town jail, a rickety shed with dreams of grandeur. Its 2 cells, slapped together from spare wood and optimism, can hold a drunk overnight, but won't stop a determined bandit with a spoon and a grudge. Most of Barnes's guests are locked up for being too sloshed, too rowdy, or disturbing the peace, which covers everything from butchering saloon karaoke to shooting holes in someone's barn while tanked on turpentine-laced whiskey. Punishment? Sleep it off, pay a fine that stings but doesn't bankrupt you, and try not to do it again. Serious crimes like horse theft, cattle rustling, or murder? Those are a whole different rodeo. They're the death penalty trifecta because stealing a horse could doom a family, and nobody's got the budget for a long-term prison. Rehab, that's a fancy word for hope you learned your lesson in the afterlife. Enter Judge Hanging Henderson, who holds court in the saloon when it's not peak drinking hours, because it's the only place big enough for trials that double as the town's Super Bowl. His nickname comes from his no-nonsense vibe. Solid evidence of a big crime? Say hello to the gallows because feeding you for years isn't in the budget. Henderson's legal training? Reading law books during slow ranch winters and settling disputes that'd stump a modern judge. His courtroom's bare bones, no stenographer, no appeals, and if you're caught red-handed, innocent until proven guilty is just a cute suggestion. Trials zip along like a stagecoach chase. Witnesses spill what they saw. Evidence, if any, gets shown, and neighbors vouch for or dunk on your character. Defense? Prove you didn't do it because whining about procedure is for city slickers. Henderson's sentencing is peak frontier. Small crimes get fines, chores, or a get-out-of-town pass. Big ones? It's hanging time because Barnes can't babysit murderers with one deputy and a grumpy horse. Hangings are the town's hottest ticket, part circus, part sermon, part, "Don't try this at home." The doomed get a last meal, a chance to monologue, and a preacher to send them off. It's grim, but the crowd loves it like it's the season finale of their favorite show. When Barnes can't keep up, the vigilantes step in, led by Captain James Morrison, a businessman who moonlights as the head of the We're Not Waiting for Paperwork crew. His posse of shopkeepers and ranchers handles horse thieves, runaway killers, or gangs too spicy for Barnes's tiny team. Vigilante justice is like frontier fast food, quick, dirty, and not always fair. Guilt's decided by group vibes, punishments instant, and appeals. Dream on. Morrison's crew has strung up 3 horse thieves, chased out shady drifters, and torched a building they swore was a crime den. It keeps the town safe-ish, but it's about as due process as a kangaroo court run by actual kangaroos. Everyone knows the rules. Play nice, or the vigilantes will yeet you into next week. Forget Hollywood's high noon duels. Real frontier fights were sloppy, sudden, and sparked by nonsense. 2 drunks bicker over cards, a your mom jab, or just because whiskey says punching is fun, and boom, someone's bleeding out on the saloon floor. Quick draw showdowns? Pure fiction. Actual gunfights were sneaky, back-shooting chaos, often fueled by bad booze and worse aim. Honor? Nah, it's about winning, not looking pretty. Take Blackjack Sullivan, the outlaw who proves the West wasn't all romantic bandits. He's no Robin Hood. He's a stone-cold psycho robbing stagecoaches, icing drivers and passengers, and terrorizing 3 territories for cash and chaos. Sullivan's the guy who'd steal your horse, burn your barn, and call it a Tuesday. His story's a reminder the Wild West wasn't a fairy tale. It was a high-stakes poker game where the stakes were your life, and the dealer was probably cheating. Blackjack Sullivan's gang wasn't here for Hollywood theatrics. They were all about the money, not the drama. They scoped out stagecoach timetables like nerds cramming for a test, targeted routes loaded with cash or gold, and set up ambushes sharper than a cactus spine. Their style? Blitz in, overwhelm with guns blazing, and plug any witnesses to keep things hush-hush. No monologues, just cold, hard efficiency. Marshal Elijah Barnes spent 2 years playing cat and mouse with Sullivan's crew, roping in sheriffs from other towns, army brass, and brave, or crazy, informants who risked their necks to spill the beans. The big takedown was a bullet-flying circus. 3 gang members bit the dust, 2 got winged, and Sullivan took 2 slugs before waving the white flag. His trial? A 1-day speed run. Survivors pointed fingers, stolen loot was paraded, and Judge Henderson dangled a confess and maybe don't swing deal. Sullivan spilled, the jury took a 20-minute coffee break to say, guilty, and by sunrise, he was doing the gallows jig in front of a town that treated it like a county fair. The gunfight at Silver Creek Corral sounds epic, but it's no noble showdown. It started with ranchers squabbling over who gets to water their cows where, spiraled through months of lawyer nonsense and dirty tricks, then erupted into a 30-second bloodbath that left 4 dead and 6 limping. No heroes, no villains, just businessmen shooting it out over dollar signs because the courts were slower than a 3-legged mule. It was less duel and more ambush gone wild, with bullets zinging down Main Street as townsfolk dove behind barrels like it was a deadly game of hide and seek. Lawman. Quick Draw Morgan wasn't some flashy gunslinger. He was a survivor, dodging death in over 20 scrapes with outlaws who wanted him deader than a doornail. His secret? Brains over trigger speed. Morgan studied his foes like a stalker, picked smart spots to fight, and shot first because this ain't a movie. It's a job. His slickest bust? Trapping cattle rustlers in an old mine and yelling, "Surrender or I'll dynamite you into next week!" They picked jail over becoming cave pancakes, saving Morgan the hassle of a shootout and the town the cost of extra bullets. Frontier towns ran on unwritten don't-be-a-jerk codes tweaked to fit each place. Respect property, own your screw-ups, and expect a swift kick, or worse, if you cross the line. Honor's cool, but not dying is cooler. Marshal Barnes couldn't be everywhere, so folks handled their own bar fights or cow thieves, leaving him to chase the big fish. It was a tightrope between protect your own and don't start a lynch mob, and everyone had to know where the line was. Courts tackled a wild mix of cases. Water rights, mining claims, and whose cow is this debates needed local savvy, not dusty law books. Contracts? Good luck when it's a handshake deal between a Swede and a Spaniard who don't speak the same language. Family drama was trickier. Divorce was rare. But when frontier life broke a marriage, it was real. Custody? Whoever could keep the kid alive won. Debt? If you couldn't pay, you might chop wood or fix fences to square up, or the town might shrug it off if you were handy enough. Justice was cheap because towns were broke. Fines filled the coffers, banishment saved on jail food, and hanging was reserved for the worst because nobody had space for a prison. Different folks brought their own rules, native tribal customs, Mexican traditions, Chinese trade habits, European property vibes, and courts had to mash it all together without starting a riot. With no fancy legal system, frontier justice was a DIY balancing act, part democracy, part dictatorship. It kept things running, but only if everyone played along. Tomorrow, you'll dive into the economic grind of frontier life and why making it to your destination was just the start of a whole new pile of headaches. Welcome to the Wild West job market, where every gig offers a thrilling chance to die spectacularly while earning pocket change. That'd make a modern barista cry. The frontier economy runs on one rule. If it pays, it'll probably kill you, preferably in a way that bankrupts your family. Let's dive into the career fair from hell, starting with mining, because nothing screams dream job like spelunking into a death trap for shiny rocks. Meet Tommy Canary Kelly, the guy who's outlived most miners in Deadwood Springs silver pits, making him the human equivalent of those birds that keel over to warn you about poison gas. His nickname's no ode to his karaoke skills. It's a badge of, I haven't died yet. Tommy's day starts pre-dawn with a gourmet breakfast of leftover beans, coffee that tastes like regret, and bread so stale it could double as a hammer. Then he's off to the mine, lowered by a rope and pulley setup that laughs in the face of gravity, creaking like it's auditioning for a horror flick. The mine's a claustrophobic fever dream, a maze of tunnels chasing silver veins through rock that's shakier than a saloon drunk. The air's so foul, a whiff of frontier barroom stench would feel like a spa day. Tommy toils by candlelight. Electricity's a distant fantasy, squinting through shadows that make every rock look like it's about to squash him. He swings hand tools for 10 to 12 hours, chiseling ore in a sweaty, subterranean nightmare that'd make modern jackhammers weep. For this suicide mission, Tommy pockets about $3 a day, if the mine boss doesn't skip town with the cash. Plenty of miners go months without pay, surviving on credit from company stores that jack prices to keep you chained to the job forever. Big Jim Patterson, the foreman, is part supervisor, part grim reaper. His job? Plan digs, handle explosives, and pray the mine doesn't eat everyone. Jim lost his left hand in week 3 when a blast went off late, teaching him that mining safety is as real as a sober outlaw. Now he rocks a wooden prosthetic, lousy for gripping, great for scaring newbies with his "don't be me" speech. Blasting involves black powder and dynamite, because finesse wasn't invited to this party. Miners drill, stuff explosives, light fuses, and sprint like their lives depend on it, because they do. Timing's everything. Too short, and you're confetti. Too long, and you've got a dud that's basically a ticking time bomb. Cave-ins are the industry's favorite pink slip, triggered by wobbly rocks, shoddy digging, and zero safety gear. When tunnels collapse, rescue means digging for bodies, because the mine's too cranky to let anyone out alive. Long term, mining's a slow-motion death sentence. Rock dust clogs lungs, turning miners into wheezing husks via silicosis. Mercury for processing silver fries your brain, leaving you shaky, forgetful, and eventually a babbling wreck. Lead poisons your blood, copper trashes your liver, and the whole gig's a science experiment on how many ways you can die before 40. Rewards. Forget striking it rich. Most miners scraped by, barely covering beans and boots, while big companies raked in the real gold. Mining towns like Deadwood Springs are frat parties with dynamite. Young, single guys, booze on tap, and guns for days. Fights break out over card games or, "you looked at me funny." Sanitation's a pipe dream, and the camp doc's best trick is amputating your leg with a whiskey chaser. Too tame? Try ranching with William Cattle King Foster, whose 50,000-acre spread sounds baller until you realize it's a gamble where your life savings ride on cows dumber than a sack of hammers. Foster's herd of 3,000 cattle is his entire fortune, plus a pile of loans backed by the cows themselves, a financial tightrope that'd give Wall Street hives. The land looks pretty but hates cows, with weather swinging from drought to blizzard like it's got a personal grudge. His cattle, bred tough, have the survival instincts of lemmings on a bender. They slurp toxic water, munch deadly weeds, and stampede during storms, crushing hundreds in a moving disaster that's half tragedy, half farce. Running a ranch like William Cattle King Foster's means dodging a zoo of predators itching to turn your herd into lunch. Wolves roll in packs, taking down full-grown cows like it's a team-building exercise. Mountain lions stalk like giant, murdery tabbies. And bears? They see your cattle as a slow-moving buffet and aren't wrong. The winter of 1886 to 1887, dubbed the Great Die-Up, was a cattle apocalypse, wiping out 90% of northern plains herds with bone-chilling cold, snow deeper than a saloon bar, and zero shelter. Foster lost his entire herd, his ranch, his loans, and his sunny dreams of ranching riches in one frosty disaster. Cowboys under Foster's payroll, like Dusty Rodriguez, pocketed about $30 a month for 20-hour days herding cattle across hellscapes. At 16, Dusty's nickname comes from clothes so filthy they could stand up and walk home. He owns 2 horses, a saddle older than dirt, and a saddlebag that holds his entire life. On drives, he chows on beans, salt pork, and coffee that could strip paint. Fresh meat? Only if someone bags a deer, but shooting risks drawing wolves, or worse, and takes time away from wrangling cows. Medical care? The trail cooks whiskey and prayers combo, good for toothaches or a broken leg, but mostly just vibes. Cattle drives are death traps on hooves, covering hundreds of miles through terrain that hates you. Rivers turn deadly when cows panic, sparking stampedes that drown riders and animals alike. Prairie fires roar across thousands of acres, forcing you to race for safety, and good luck outrunning flames on a tired horse. Dusty ages faster than a TikTok trend, and most cowboys like him don't see 40, worn out by weather, kicks, and the occasional trampling. Think farming's safer? Meet Lars Peterson, homesteader extraordinaire, chasing the Homestead Act's free 160 acres deal from 1862. Sounds sweet, until Lars finds out his patch of prairie is drier than a preacher's sermon and laughs at traditional plows. His first task? Build a house with no trees or rocks. Enter the sod house, dirt bricks stacked into leaky, crumbly walls that host snakes, bugs, and existential dread. Rain turns it into a mud pie. Drought makes it a dust bowl. Breaking prairie sod is like wrestling a prehistoric beast. The grass's root mat snaps plows and exhausts oxen, and prepping a few acres takes months of soul-crushing labor. Once crops are in, Lars battles droughts, floods, hail, wind, and grasshopper swarms that devour everything green. Crops, gardens, even tool handles left in the field. It's like the bugs unionized to ruin his life. Rachel Mitchell, Lars's wife, is a frontier superwoman juggling cooking, cleaning, childcare, and sewing while also plowing fields, herding cows, and playing nurse. Her day starts before dawn and ends when the stars are out, with 0 weekends. Pregnant? She's still hauling water. Post-birth? Back to work in days because crops don't care about recovery. Rachel lost 2 kids to diseases a modern pharmacy could have fixed, and her surviving children, barely past toddlerhood, are out there hoeing fields by age 8. Survival's a family affair, no exceptions. Farm accidents are a grim lottery. Makeshift tools with no safety features crush fingers, livestock kick heads, and collapsing barns don't send get-well cards. Equipment fails miles from help, and a bad break means a slow death. Even a bumper crop's a headache. Shipping it to market costs an arm and a leg, and middlemen snatch most of the profit. Lars and Rachel barely break even, making farming less path to riches and more path to not starving, maybe. The frontier's mix of deadly jobs, broke bank economics, and soul-grinding isolation is a gauntlet that'd make modern folks cry for their 9-to-5s. Yet thousands chased these dreams, lured by land and opportunity they couldn't get back east, even if it meant rolling the dice on bankruptcy, injury, or a pine box. Tomorrow, you'll see how frontier kids grew up in a world that'd give child services a heart attack, where childhood meant mini-adult and innocence was a luxury nobody could afford. You've dodged the Wild West's job market death traps, but now comes the real boss battle. Raising kids in a world so brutal it'd make modern child services speed dial the National Guard. Frontier parenting was like running a military campaign with a dash of medieval chaos. Think less timeouts and more survive or bust. Meet Elizabeth Iron Lizzie Carter, a widow wrangling 5 kids after her husband got squashed in a mining mishap that could have been avoided with a smidge of, "Hey, maybe don't stand there." Her nickname isn't for being tough. It's for keeping her kids alive 3 years running, a feat as rare as hitting the jackpot while dodging lightning during a meteor shower. Lizzie's up at 4 a.m. Mahigis diskisi. Not because she's a morning person, but because sleeping in means her kids might yeet themselves into a bear's den, torch the cabin, or turn a butter churn into a concussion machine. Her crew, ages 4 to 16, is a parenting nightmare. A toddler who thinks rocks are snacks, grade schoolers who treat "don't die" as a suggestion, and teens with adult muscles but the impulse control of caffeinated chipmunks. Forget childhood innocence. Frontier kids were tiny workers in a family sweatshop. 6-year-old Tommy Carter's on chicken duty, snagging eggs and hauling water, not for cute chores, but because mom needs her hands free for grown-up grunt work. 8-year-old Mary's cooking, scrubbing, babysitting, weeding the garden, and wrangling cows, tasks that'd make OSHA faint. She's dodging sharp knives and moody livestock like it's just Tuesday. 12-year-old Samuel's out with the men, heaving logs and plowing fields because the frontier didn't care about your birthday. He's toting guns, running sketchy machinery, and deciding which crops keep the family from starving, all with the stakes of a high roller poker game. 14-year-old Rebecca's basically a frontier ER nurse, sewing clothes, canning food, and patching up neighbors. She's delivered babies, stitched gunshot wounds, and hacked off frostbitten digits with a kitchen knife and a whiskey chaser. 16-year-old James moonlights as a ranch hand, breaking broncos, tracking stray cows, and handling bar fights with the chill of someone who's been adulting since kindergarten. This wasn't cruelty. It was survival school. Kids saw births, deaths, pig slaughters, and saloon shootouts as normal, not therapy-worthy trauma. The Carter Kids' school is a winter-only gig with Miss Sarah Williams, a 22-year-old Connecticut gal who answered a shady ad for an adventurous teaching job. She's herding 40 kids ages 5 to 17 in a one-room shack that's also the church, town hall, and occasional barn dance spot. Her supplies? A few dog-eared readers, some slates, and an arithmetic book that's seen better days. Miss Sarah's students pop in when farm work allows, so she's forever reteaching the ABCs to kids who vanish for planting season. Some teens outweigh her and scoff at authority, shaped by a world where you call your own shots or die. Discipline? A hickory stick and the vibe that learning's got to be smacked into you when hunting or hog butchering feels more useful. Whacking wasn't mean. It was focus, or the prairie eats you. The schoolhouse's decor, church crosses and wanted posters, reminds everyone it's a multi-purpose chaos hub, not exactly Montessori. Medical care for kids comes from Anna Kowalski, a Polish immigrant turned accidental doctor. Her kit's a horror show, rusty scalpels, iffy herbs, and enough laudanum to knock out a mule team. Fevers get bloodletting, infections get mercury, yep, poison, and anything weird gets a prayer and a shrug. Anna's the go-to for a kid sniffles, broken bones, or births gone sideways, but it's less House MD. And more, hope this doesn't kill you. 1 in 4 frontier kids didn't make adulthood, felled by measles, diphtheria, scarlet fever, whooping cough, or dysentery that turned them into dehydrated husks. Accidents were a close second. Open wells were kid magnets, unguarded machines mangled tiny hands, guns left lying around went off, and cranky horses didn't care if you were pint-sized. The frontier was a theme park of how many ways can a kid get hurt, and the mortality stats were a grim scoreboard of a world that didn't baby-proof anything. The constant threat of losing kids hit frontier families like a sledgehammer, leaving scars deeper than a canyon. Parents braced for it, sometimes reusing names for new babies if older ones didn't make it. A habit that creeps out modern folks, but was their way of wrestling grief in a world where death gate-crashed every birthday. Kids watched siblings get taken out by fevers, falls, or stray bullets, powerless to stop it. This baked in a tough-as-nails mindset that kept them going but left them with a whatever, life's a coin toss vibe that stuck like bad whiskey. Childbirth was a frontier woman's ultimate boss fight, with a 1 in 100 chance of not walking away. Clara Johansson faced each pregnancy like a high-stakes poker game, knowing it could be her last hand. She relied on Anna Kowalski and other local women whose medical know-how came from trial, error, and a whole lot of guts. Prenatal care, old wives' tales, and herbal teas that were hit or miss, sometimes helpful, sometimes, whoops, that's poison. Delivery happened in dusty cabins with no sterile gear, dim lamps, and 911. Breech babies or bleeding. Good luck. Those were often game over for mom, baby, or both. Pain relief? A slug of whiskey or laudanum, and surgery meant a kitchen knife sterilized over a fire. Babies who made it faced a gauntlet of infections, hunger, or just being too cold or hot, with many checking out in weeks. Survivors dodged diseases, mishaps, and skimpy diets that stunted growth, or worse. Moms like Clara kept nursing while plowing fields, herding cows, and hauling water because formula wasn't a thing, and babies needed milk to not starve in a world where food was a gamble. Isolation was a parenting gut punch, Lizzie Carter might go weeks without adult chit-chat, stuck with her kids and the occasional "how's the weather" from a neighbor. That loneliness messed with her head, making it tough to be a nurturing mom while wrestling frontier chaos. Kids grew up with just their family for company, so their social skills were as polished as a tumbleweed. Many hit adulthood clueless about big city manners. Their childhood spent herding goats or dodging rattlesnakes, not sipping tea at parties. Religion for kids came from wandering preachers who'd breeze through town like spiritual pop-up shops. These guys crammed a year's worth of sermons into a weekend, then left families to DIY faith with tattered Bibles. With Protestants, Catholics, Jews, Native Americans, and non-believers sharing Deadwood Springs, religious classes in the schoolhouse were a diplomatic tightrope. Imagine a theological potluck where everyone's arguing over the recipe. Kids' fun was low budget and high risk. No toy stores, so they played tag, hide and seek, or whacked sticks at rocks for baseball. Games doubled as survival prep, climbing trees, swimming in sketchy creeks, or racing horses without helmets. Modern safety nuts would faint, but back then it was just Tuesday. Playing with axes or guns, totally normal, until it wasn't. Playtime was squeezed between chores, and during harvest, kids worked sunup to sundown, swapping stories or singing to stay sane. Books were gold. One tattered novel might entertain a whole family, read aloud by firelight. Kids memorized chunks for fun because you couldn't lug a library when plowing. Holidays like Christmas or the 4th of July were rare blowouts, with potlucks, homemade fiddles, and decorations cobbled from scraps. Kids got a crash course in socializing, learning to square dance or not offend the neighbor whose cow you accidentally shot. Growing up was a sprint, not a stroll. By their teens, frontier kids had skills that'd make modern adults cry. Running farms, shooting straight, or haggling like Wall Street pros. Childhood faded fast, blending into adulthood with no fanfare, because the frontier didn't care if you were 13 or 30. You worked or you sank. Tomorrow, you'll see how the Wild West morphed from lawless chaos to civilized society, and why the cowboy myths we love were spun to sell a version of America that never quite existed. You've outlasted the Wild West's family survival gauntlet, but now brace for the ultimate plot twist. The frontier's makeover from scrappy chaos to a corporate playground where the old dangers feel like a warm hug compared to the new breed of wolves. One's in fancy suits, waving contracts instead of guns. Say hello to the Wild West 2.0, where big money steamrolls the grit and guts of yesteryear. Enter Harrison Vanderbilt Jr., a railroad tycoon who's never known a day of hunger or dodged a rattlesnake. Born with a silver spoon and a heart of pure capitalism, he's the poster boy for the new frontier boss. Less survive a blizzard, and more buy the blizzard and charge it rent. Vanderbilt's railroads link far-flung towns to big markets, which sounds awesome until you see his price tags. Farmers, ranchers, and shopkeepers pay through the nose because it's his tracks, or a 500-mile hike with a sack of potatoes. Monopoly, more like Monopo Squeezy. The Transcontinental Railroad's 1869 debut was a game changer. Months of wagon train torture shrank to days if you could stomach the fares and didn't mind riding in wooden boxes that made stagecoaches feel like limos. Passenger cars had coal stoves that sometimes turned toasty into toasted, with windows that blasted you with smoke, ash, and enough dust to start a new prairie. Vanderbilt's rail empire grew fat on government handouts, land grants, cash, and loans that let taxpayers eat the risk while he pocketed the profits. Lobbyists today? Amateurs compared to his political schmoozing. Those land grants gifted Vanderbilt's crew millions of acres packed with minerals, timber, and farmland, which they mined, logged, or sold for extra cash. Settlers died for scraps of that land. Vanderbilt got it free, no grizzly bear chases required. Building the rails was a death sentence for workers, especially Chinese crews on the western lines. They juggled nitroglycerin like it was a party trick, worked through Sierra blizzards that buried entire teams, and earned less than white workers for jobs that'd make miners look cushy. Safety training? Try not to explode, was the vibe. Cornelius Gold King Stone is the mining world's corporate villain, turning prospector dreams into a corporate cash grab. His company swapped picks and pans for industrial tech, funded by East Coast moneybags. Stone's hydraulic mining washed away whole hills for gold, leaving landscapes looking like the moon had a bad day. His crews pulled more shiny stuff in months than lone miners could in a lifetime of sweaty tunnel digging. Independent prospectors? Crushed. Stone's geologists and megadrills made their gold panning as quaint as a buggy in a car race. Theodore Beef Baron Richardson turned ranching into a corporate cattle factory, with herds so big they'd blot out the sun across multiple states. Forget scrappy cowboys. His operation was Wall Street with hooves, bankrolled by Eastern cash and run like a meat machine. Richardson's team bred cows like assembly line widgets, shipped them via sweetheart rail deals, and sweet-talked politicians for cheap grazing rights on public land. Small ranchers couldn't touch. The lone cowboy vibe? Dead. His ranch hands were wage slaves, Nawa, not free-spirited horsemen, trading grit for a paycheck and zero glory. Banking? Augustus Moneybags Whitman's got that locked down, evolving from a shady poker hustler to a legit banker who'd make payday loan sharks blush. His bank fuels corporate dreams while squeezing regular folks dry. Farmers and shopkeepers beg for loans, only to lose their land when they can't pay up. Whitman's tied to Eastern finance tycoons who see the West as a giant slot machine, not a home for struggling towns. His bank's the middleman for big money, turning Deadwood Springs into a pawn in a high-stakes Wall Street game. The Wild West's corporate takeover wasn't just a cash grab. It came with a political circus that traded six-shooters for slicker scams. Meet Mayor Patrick Honest Pat O'Sullivan, whose nickname drips with irony thicker than saloon molasses. He's the crookedest politico in the territory, but his bribe system's so slick, it's like a VIP pass for businesses willing to slip him some green. Pat's machine runs Deadwood Springs like a game of Monopoly he's already rigged, doling out jobs to cronies, scaring off naysayers, and stuffing ballot boxes with moves that'd make modern campaign gurus jealous. Want a city contract? Highest bidder wins. Zoning change? Cough up campaign cash. Laws? They're more like suggestions, enforced when Pat's pals say so. This shift from vigilante pauses to corporate courtrooms swapped grizzly bears for legal traps. Corporate lawyers, armed with jargon denser than a buffalo stampede, bamboozled settlers who couldn't afford a law book, let alone a suit to fight back. It was less high-noon showdown and more, here's a 50-page contract, good luck, pal, snatching land and resources with ink sneakier than any outlaw's knife. Workers pushed back with unions, led by Red McCarthy, an Irish rebel turned labor firebrand who got kicked out of eastern factories for stirring up strikes. Out west, he rallied workers to demand better than work till you drop deals. But corporate goons made Black Jack Sullivan look like a choir boy, using beatdowns, threats, and the occasional permanent nap to squash union dreams. Red's crew faced a war where the bosses fought dirtier than a pig in a mudslide. The Homestead Act of 1862, that free land for all fairy tale, got hijacked by corporate tricksters. Railroads, mines, and cattle empires paid stooges to file fake claims, then flipped the deeds to build mega holdings, turning family farm dreams into corporate playgrounds. Company towns were the ultimate flex, whole villages owned by one bigwig, controlling houses, shops, and jobs with private muscle that laughed at your rights. Workers shelled out crazy prices at company stores, lived in company shacks, and got paid in fake cash, company scrip, that locked them in debt slavery with a corporate bow on top. Mother Nature took a beating worse than a saloon brawler. Industrial mines spewed mercury into creeks. Timber crews axed forests older than Grandma's quilt. And corporate farms burned out soil faster than a prairie fire. Railroads supercharged the buffalo slaughter, with corporate hunters blasting millions for hides and bones, leaving rotting piles so gross even tough cowpokes gagged. The government egged it on, treating trees and critters like roadblocks to progress, not treasures worth saving. Corporate culture bulldozed frontier quirks for East Coast business vibes. Company schools churned out obedient drones, not scrappy pioneers, while corporate churches preached follow the boss over think for yourself. Local papers turned into corporate fanzines, burying dirt on toxic spills, worker woes, or Pat's latest grift to keep the money train chugging. Forget shootouts. Spin control was the new sheriff. Courts bowed to corporate cash, with judges and prosecutors climbing the ladder by kissing business boots, not defending Joe Settler. Corporate lawyers twisted laws to win land grabs, enforce dodgy contracts, and dodge pesky charges. The old frontier's random perils, snakes, storms, were child's play next to factory maulings, poisoned rivers, and economic scams that hit like a freight train and stuck like glue. This corporate coup crushed the frontier's scrappy teamwork, where folks from all walks banded together to survive. Now, it's top-down rule, with wage slaves replacing free-spirited ranchers. In mere decades, dusty outposts turned into industrial hubs, proving cold cash outmuscles frontier heart every time. Tomorrow, you'll dig into how this corporate West spawned American myths. Cowboy yarns spun to sell a shiny story that swept exploitation, eco-wrecking, and cultural erasure under the rug, crafting an identity more legend than truth. You've seen the Wild West morph from a gritty survival slog into a corporate cash cow, but now brace for the ultimate Hollywood glow-up, swapping ugly reality for shiny myths that served big agendas while wrapping America's identity in a cozy, cowboy-shaped blanket. And it's like turning a dumpster fire into a blockbuster with extra popcorn. Enter William Buffalo Bill Cody, a former scout and buffalo slaying champ who figured out that faking frontier life for city slickers was way cushier and less deadly than the real deal. Starting in the 1880s, his Wild West shows dished out staged Indian raids, stagecoach heists, and trick shooting that had as much to do with the frontier as pro wrestling has with actual sports. Think choreographed chaos, minus the cholera and rattlesnakes. Cody's gigs were catnip for Eastern audiences who'd never sniffed a prairie, but dreamed of cowboy glory based on pure fantasy and zero clue about the West's brutal truths. His shows starred savage Indians who attacked on cue, dashing cowboys saving ladies without a speck of dysentery, and sharpshooters who never mentioned that real frontier gunplay often ended in, "Whoops, I shot my foot." Europeans lapped it up, heading home with tales of America's Wild West that were as real as a unicorn rodeo, shaping global views and diplomatic chats for decades. Then there's Ned Buntline, the dime novel king who spun Wild West yarns from his New York desk, having spent about 3 weeks west of the Mississippi, mostly in bars. A former con man and Navy deserter, his resume screamed, "Facts? Who needs 'em?" His hundreds of novels starred dead-eye sheriffs, noble cowpokes saving settlers from cartoonish Indians, and bad guys so evil they practically twirled mustaches. Action trumped depth. Good versus evil was black and white. And survival struggles? Nah, let's have another shootout. Mass-printed for pennies, these books hooked working-class readers craving thrills, not history lessons, birthing fictional heroes bigger than real ones, and setting the stage for a century of Western tropes. Matthew Brady Jr., a photographer with dollar signs in his eyes, added glossy visuals to the myth machine. His staged shots of heroic cowboys, stoic Indians, and untouched landscapes were less documentary and more Instagram filter for 1875. Forget the mud, smallpox scars, or trashed rivers. Brady's photos, splashed across Eastern papers and mags, sold a West that existed only in his lens and his clients' wallets. These became the blueprint for Hollywood Westerns, cementing a fake aesthetic that's still kicking despite zero ties to gritty frontier snapshots. This myth-making hit its stride just as the real frontier fizzled, tamed by railroads, corporations, and government muscle. Easterners could swoon over cowboy tales because the West's actual dangers, starvation, raids, rogue bears, were history. The timing let folks play pretend without facing the real West's gut-punch reality. These myths weren't just fun, they pushed big agendas. The taming the wild narrative painted America's land grab as a noble quest, with settlers bringing democracy and progress to empty lands. Spoiler, they weren't. It sold expansion as a moral win, ignoring that unused land belonged to folks who'd lived there forever. Cowboy and Indian tales whitewashed native genocide, framing it as epic battles of civilization versus savagery, not a calculated government campaign of slaughter, theft, and broken treaties. Corporations loved the myth too. It hyped lone rangers and lucky prospectors while burying the truth. Most Western wealth went to Eastern tycoons who worked folks to death in mines and ranches. Stories of rugged individualism distracted from wage slave reality and factory-level exploitation. Psychologically, these tales were a balm for Americans rattled by factories, cities, and immigrants shaking up old ways. Cowboy yarns sold a tough, unique American spirit, forged in the West's crucible, perfect for boosting confidence during global rivalries. They screamed, "We're special," a pep talk for a nation flexing on the world stage. The Wild West's romantic myths didn't just gloss over the tough stuff. They airbrushed out the environmental carnage that came with civilizing the frontier. Stories of rugged pioneers living in harmony with nature, pure bunk. Industrial mining spewed mercury into rivers, loggers mowed down ancient forests, buffalo were blasted to near extinction, and soil was farmed to dust. That's not one with nature, it's nature getting a beatdown, left out of the campfire tales because poisoned creeks don't sell dime novels. The myths also ghosted non-white folks who were the backbone of the West. Chinese railroad workers, Mexican vaqueros, black cowboys, and native guides. Their skills kept the frontier running, but Hollywood's script flipped them invisible, painting the West as a white dude's triumph. This erasure propped up racial pecking orders, making it easier to keep non-whites on the sidelines long after the last saloon closed. Women's stories got the same rose-tinted treatment. Forget dainty pioneer gals baking pies in bonnets. Real frontier women like Clara Johansson were hauling water, birthing babies in dirt floor cabins, and burying kids at rates that'd make a horror movie blush. The myths skipped their grueling work, sky-high death tolls, and zero shot at owning land because heroic housewife sounds snappier than worked to death. Hollywood westerns, kicking off in the early 1900s, turned this hogwash into high art with sweeping vistas and cowboy cliches that stuck like gum on a boot. They crafted iconic landscapes, Lone Ranger types, and showdowns that had zip to do with history but everything to do with box office bucks. Producers didn't care about truth. They wanted fistfights, love stories, and clear-cut baddies to keep seats filled, not lecture halls. These flicks shaped global views of America, selling a cowboy swagger that helped Uncle Sam play moral cop in world politics. A gun-slinging, freedom-loving image smoothed the way for military flexes and trade deals, because who argues with John Wayne? The myths still linger, with politicians tossing around frontier spirit to push policies as unrelated to 1875 as Wi-Fi is to wagon trains. Brands lean in too, slapping cowboy hats on ads for trucks or beer, banking on that rugged vibe to move product. Modern folks lap up these tales because they're a cozy escape from today's messy world. Stories of lone heroes conquering all with grit and guts feel better than grappling with gridlocked politics or corporate red tape. The myths whisper, "You're special, America," a pep talk for a nation wading through complexity. But the frontier's real fingerprints are everywhere. Property laws, water rights, and Fed-state tug-of-wars were born in those dusty deals and brawls. Environmental scars, trashed rivers, barren mines, overfarmed plains still demand cleanup, while corporate tricks from back then set the tone for today's resource grab fests. The West's melting pot, Chinese, Mexican, Black, Native, European, shaped America's multicultural vibe, even if the myths tried to whitewash it. Their ingenuity, from sod houses to cattle drives, still echoes in our culture, often mislabeled as white pioneer pluck. As the campfire fizzles and the prairie breeze tickles your neck, our Wild West romp wraps up. You've tasted why your Netflix and chill self wouldn't last a hot minute in 1875's brutal reality. You've peeked behind Hollywood's curtain, where survival was a grind, death was your annoying sidekick, and life was raw, no filter needed. The stars twinkle like they did for those tough-as-nails folks who built towns with calloused hands, stared down crazy odds, and left a legacy stronger than any movie prop. Their real tale, grubby, unglamorous, gut-punch tough, packs enough raw courage to light a spark in us for ages. Snuggle up, grateful for your cozy bed and fridge full of snacks, all thanks to those ordinary souls who tackled epic challenges. Maybe in your dreams you'll catch a flicker of that wild, perilous, jaw-dropping frontier and wake up with a grin for the insane ride that got us here. Nighty-night, you wannabe cowpokes. Sweet dreams.